Spider-Man 3 is going to be absolutely stacked, but Insomniac has some bigger plans in the meantime. We got lots of new teases for the upcoming DLC, Miles taking the charge for a while during Peter's break, and a very exciting take on some special villains. But if you're looking for endless fantasy action, then totally check out Zenless Zone Zero, a brand new multi-platform urban action RPG from HoYoverse, playable on PC, consoles, and mobile phones. Also, huge thanks to the team for sponsoring today's video. But the game is really making waves, so make sure you jump in the upcoming second beta test phase by following the links down below. Simply sign up on the page with your existing HoYoverse account or register a new one if you haven't. Then choose your preferred platform and input the code you get via email. Once you accept the terms, there's a survey you'll have to complete, at the end of which you're pretty much all set for the upcoming beta. But you will get a chance to experience a thrilling and dynamic combat system that is easy to get into for newcomers while still providing a challenge for all of you veterans out there. Plus, there are lots of amazing looking characters to choose from, all with their own unique powers, and it's all set in a captivating fantasy world. Totally check out Zenless Zone Zero and participate in the second beta test by following the links down below. Huge thanks to HoYoverse once more for the sponsorship, and now back to the video. But to start things off, I'm sure many of you heard by now that Insomniac wanted to have a moment of handing down the reins over to Miles, kinda making him the main Spider-Man for now, though quite a bit of it was taken out of context. And it's not a matter of replacing Peter with Miles as much as it seems to be giving Peter a much deserved break for the time being, similar to how it also already happened during the previous Miles Morales game. Now, during an interview with Gizmodo, the narrative leads mentioned that, and I quote, "It always felt very natural and I think we all collectively thought it would happen. To me, it shows a great deal of evolution from Miles." Morris also goes on to explain how at the start of the game, Miles is still struggling to figure out what he wants with his life, but by the end, he carries the burden of saving the city and even Peter at some point. So quite a bit of this was taken out of context, but after judging it for a bit, I think it's becoming more clear that this is a matter of how Insomniac is planning to handle the future releases in the Spider-Man universe rather than taking out a main character completely. That's simply not the case here. And I'm saying that because there are way too many unresolved conflicts for Peter, mostly set up for Spider-Man 3 not to have him back. On one side, there's that end story hospital scene when Norman mentions the Goblin Serum. Given Peter's strong connection to Harry, it's very likely that Norman will find out who he really is, make the connection if he doesn't already suspect it. Plus, he already blames the two Spider-Man for Harry being back into a coma. Plus, in the whole Green Goblin saga, it's just too iconic not to have the conflict between Peter and Norman. The only slight continuity issue I have here is that in the post-credit raft scene, he asks Octavius if he knows the identity of the Spider-Man, as in both of them. However, Octavius could possibly not know the identity outside of the OG Spider-Man as Peter, as the events with Miles happened after he already went to prison. So I think this will be a thing explained off screen or implied straight out of the gate in the next game. And I'm saying that because, yeah, Insomniac already did the same with Sandman, which was previously stuck in a vial that Peter held in Spider-Man 2018. But that went straight into combat in 2023, and again, it was never explained. All you needed to know is that it just happened. Another case against his complete removal is his newly acquired anti-venom power. Peter at the end of Spider-Man 2 is simply stronger than he's ever been. So it makes little sense to completely take out a character that's literally in his prime. However, it does make sense for him to take on a vacation after everything that happened just in the past few years. Plus, he has the whole decade of being Spider-Man before that. And I don't see Peter ever staying put from not being a superhero and helping others in need. Maybe this is a way for them to kind of bring him out of the break in Spider-Man 3, maybe having such a big event that Miles can't handle it on his own, or maybe something that really enacts Peter to jump back into the fight and of course continuing his superhero adventures. Now, this leaves us off with some very interesting DLC setups too. It's clear that Daredevil is going to be the first thing to happen, as we're getting more hints almost every week. It seems that Brian has been dropping Daredevil hints almost constantly, almost since release. There was a moment, for example, during the PlayStation listening party when he asked, "Where is Daredevil?" out of nowhere. So he's either trolling at this point or just teasing the fans, but it's just getting too ridiculous. Plus the recent update 104 that brought back the Nelson and Murdoch sign, plus the eviction notice gone from the window, and again Brian on Twitter saying, I guess they paid their rent. And we had all of these connections in the world and locations that seem to build up to something Daredevil related. And if investigation is the theme, maybe there's still a chance for the Chameleon to be handled in the DLCs as well, rather than waiting for the sequel. And I'm saying that because his unresolved issue after the death of his half-brother Kraven seems a lot more immediate than waiting like 3 more years until we get to jump back against him. Unless he really likes to plot his revenges super long time, but I would much rather want to see Chameleon in his own DLC because I find him to be such a cool character. Otherwise, with Peter not being completely out of the picture just yet, but mostly taking like a small vacation, I think that judging by Insomniac's statement of mainlining Miles for now, they're most likely referring to the standalone Miles Morales game that's likely going to drop in between this Spider-Man and 3. And I think it's very likely that Insomniac will raise the stakes even higher now, even in the standalone, possibly add more than just Miles as a playable character. I'm personally most excited to see how they build up the character of Silk, which they mentioned heavily in some of the recent interviews. It seems Insomniac is planning to give her the Martin Lee treatment, as in a character that didn't get a ton of exposure outside of the immediate fan base, so mostly comics and such, but one that they love to show to a wider audience. And again, Mr. Negative was absolutely amazingly handled. I cannot wait to see how they do so, but with a character that's a hero instead. She had a pretty interesting teaser in the post-credit scenes as her dad is dating Rio Morales. So yeah, this could totally be a moment at some point in which either Miles or Cindy finds out about the other one's powers and secret identity, but I can also see Miles becoming kind of like a mentor to Cindy, sort of how Peter did to him. And her unique powers would make her a very interesting character to play too. The only question is, how will they condense that in just a Miles standalone, which usually is like much shorter than the main storyline. Either way, it's very clear that Cindy needs to be established first and have her introduced, kinda having her moment before being thrown in the larger conflicts coming up in Spider-Man 3. Now, also more interesting is that the Symbiote saga isn't fully resolved. After Venom, it doesn't take too long for Carnage to follow, and Cassidy getting his hands on a symbiote is clearly building up to something big. Now, Insomniac also explained why they only dedicated him a side story instead of making him part of the main narrative in Spider-Man 2. And it's mostly because they wanted to set their priorities on Peter and Miles, making sure to showcase them as developing heroes from the beginning to the end, and also doing enough to have Venom's story in their own way too. Plus, they later on mentioned that there are a number of villains that fully deserve their own time on the screen. To quote that article, if we dive into the Carnage storyline, we want to make sure to really give it everything it deserves. What's interesting is that taking a look at the comments, there's a connection to Carnage for both Peter and Miles, especially if we take a look at some of the recent crossover events. However, in the case of Insomniac, they clearly made the connection a bit stronger to Peter, given the fact that it was him and Yuri, or well, the character of Wraith, taking down the Flame and meeting up Cassidy at the end of it. So I don't think that Peter is going to get taken out of the equation. I think that it's still going to have him involved in this, case in which I'm expecting it either in a DLC or in the full-on sequel. But I'm mostly inclined to say the DLC, maybe the last DLC that Spider-Man 2 gets, because that might also be a way to resolve his anti-Venom power sort of situation. Maybe having a bigger conflict against Carnage in one of the end DLCs might also like remove his anti-Venom powers, also force him into that vacation that Insomniac also wants to bring Peter into, and maybe kind of like bring a fresh slate for Spider-Man 3. Otherwise, anti-Venom Peter just feels too strong even for Green Goblin to handle, even though technically speaking in this universe, Green Goblin serum is essentially a combination between the Spider-Man DNA and the symbiote. Yeah, totally let me know down below in the comments what you think, but there's also a connection to Miles that seems very interesting. There was a very interesting hint in one of the recent interviews, so at some point with the Gizmodo article, Arfman also gets asked if we will ever get to see Miles getting a symbiote, given the fact that Peter Harry, as well as MJ all got one. To which he says, I'm going to plead the fifth. So maybe not completely ruled out just yet, but there was an interesting moment in the 2019 Absolute Carnage crossover during which Miles does get possessed by a fragment of the Grendel symbiote. And this results in some really wicked 8-limb variant, completely brainwashed to serve Null, and even featuring the same spiral emblem we saw all the symbiotes during the invasion of New York. So there's at least some connection here being established by Insomniac after all of the ways that they displayed that symbol on the meteorite fragments as well as on the faces of these symbiotes too. So many ways that they featured that. However, I don't think that they will explain the symbiote saga further than that in the Spider-Man games. It's possible, however, that they might do so in that future Venom spin-off, which I think would be the perfect setting to like just explore all of these unknown issues that are like kind of alien, no pun intended, to most of the Spider fans outside of the comics. So if you take a look at the comics when it comes to the symbiotes, there's a lot of lore behind it. There is a planet full of symbiotes, there's a symbiote god in there, there's a invasion of Earth at some point, and it kind of becomes this whole bigger issue. It definitely seems that something could be explored in this way in that Venom kind of spin-off, maybe show his origin a little bit, explore more of his initial planet before dropping on Earth. I would definitely love to see that. Anyway, that is about it with the news so far. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.